Hey, it's Mr. T here, and today we're going to be talking about our next economics topic, which is the gross domestic product. The little guiding question, what does GDP tell us and how give us an indication of how healthy our economy is? As we learn about GDP, and maybe you guys have heard GDP in the news or while watching CNN 10, you'll find out how we use it in economics and what it tells us about a country and what it tells us about that country's economy. So some terms that are important, obviously in GDP, okay, we're going to learn what that is and what that means. We're going to talk about per capita, per person GDP. And we're also going to talk about how they figure out what the per capita GDP is. So what equation is used to determine that, which will be important in your work this week. So first, gross domestic product. So GDP means gross domestic product. Most commonly, it's referred to as GDP. And that is the dollar value of all goods and services that are produced in one country during 1 year. So anything that is made here in the United States or provided as a service, and you guys remember we went over what the differences between a goods and a service, the dollar value. So if a movie ticket costs $15, that added into the GDP. Your iPhone costs $1,000, that's added into the GDP, and you take all of those goods and services that are created in 1 year, and that equals the country's GDP. And so going back to 2014, the United States GDP total goods and services, the value of those that were made was $17.7 trillion. 2015, it went up to 17.95 trillion. And you can see it has continued to go up each year until last year we had a GDP in the United States of $21.42 trillion. The fact that it continues to go up is a good thing, which means that our economy is strong because our economy is producing lots of goods and services, and there's a lot of people that have the money to buy those goods and services. Okay. One thing to remember though, GDP only counts the final product, so it does not double count. What that means is those cell phones that you guys have or that we have, in GDP, only the final cost of the cell phone is added or included. That doesn't include the cost of the parts that go in to make it. So like the CPUs and the RAM and the screens, those costs are not included in GDP, even though those are produced by this country, or sometimes they are produced in this country, but they are adding that cost into the final cost of the phone. So they only count it as the final cost of the phone, so they don't double count, or else the number will get skewed. All right, let's look at some of the top 15 and bottom 15 countries in the world in comparison of GDP. So we're just going to kind of go through this list. The top 15 economies in the world, you got United States, followed by China, Japan, Germany, India, United Kingdom, France, Italy, Brazil, Canada, Russia, South Korea, Spain, Australia, and Mexico. See, the United States and China are clearly the top two economies, with the United States at 21.4 trillion and China at $14.14 trillion in gross domestic product. Sharp fall off there between China and Japan, but then all the other countries are pretty close together in the amount of products and services that they are making per year. The bottom 15 countries are, a lot smaller countries. East Timor, Antigua, Barbuda, Solomon Islands, and a lot of these are island nations with a lot smaller populations. And you can see there that some of them, are in the millions, and some of them are even thousands. So they're not producing much. All right, so why should you care about GDP? Okay. simple. It is easy measure of the growth or the decline in the economy. The economy is growing. That is good for you and I. And obviously, if the economy is declining, then that means that there's probably less jobs that are going to be available. People have less money to spend, and that's not a good thing. Hey, it's also a way to compare our economy to other countries' economy. Who is doing better? Who is on the rise? Who is on the decline? So that's what they use GDP for, and why it should be something that we care about. All right, so on top of GDP, which measures the total output of the country, we have something called the per capita GDP. Okay? And this looks at the average contribution per person towards GDP. So how much does one person contribute toward the GDP, or how much value do they have as workers? And there is a simple equation that we use. So take overall GDP number. So for like the United States, it would be that $21.47 trillion number, and we divide it by the population, the amount of people that are working in the population, which we covered last chapter. And that will give us our per capita GDP. Okay, so pretty easy to figure out. Now, there are negative things here about GDP. Okay, so GDP does not factor the following things. So if you are working and you get unpaid, or your volunteer work, the work that you do does not get counted in GDP. Okay? It essentially means it has no value towards the country's output. Okay? If there are things sold on a black market, or a market that's not recognized by, it not get counted in the GDP. Okay? It also doesn't care about products and services. It doesn't care what your country makes. It's just the output that they're focusing on. And to finally, to end our discussion on GDP, you have here just a chart, a map of the world with color coordination. You can see the darker the blue, which means the higher the GDP per capita is. So that means that people are making more products and goods per person in those countries. So kind of the same. You got the United States, Canada, you got Australia, all of the Europe, and Japan is some highly per capita GDP countries. And the lower you get on the color scale towards the red or the oranges, mean that people are not making as much per capita. That is it for our session. Make sure you guys are answering the questions on this chapter today, and watch those videos on how money is made. And I'll see you guys next week.